What is your goal when correcting a fellow Christian? Is it to win an argument, or is it to win your brother back? Find out how the Bible says we should approach accountability. If our goal is to actually win our brother and to have a meaningful relationship with them going forward, then we really have to make sure that how we approach it is done with this goal in mind, or how he would tip over the tables in the temple. And that's absolutely true. He did those things, and he was and is and always will be love. He had the patience. He had the long suffering. He even loved so far as to lay his life down so that we could come into relationship with God, that we could be shown that we're on the wrong way, and that we could be won back onto being on the right path. Hello and welcome back to the Banner Bearers YouTube channel. For those who are new here, Banner Bearers is a ministry looking to encourage and equip people to engage in spiritual warfare as part of their Christian life. We see it as something very clearly stated in the Bible that our fight is in the spiritual realm, and that's why I've started this YouTube channel. A lot of what we talk about also has to do with laying the foundation and looking at general Christian health, not just focusing on spiritual warfare. And that's why I make videos such as this one, where we're talking about how we approach accountability as Christians. If you haven't already, please do consider subscribing to the channel. It really helps to get this channel picked up by the algorithm and shared to other people. And if this message blesses you, then please do like and comment, and as I said, share it to those who you know. So, call to accountability, a Christlike approach to correction. This video was something that I really decided to make after the 2024 US presidential election. I'm not going to be talking too much about politics. I'm not going to be talking about which candidate should have or should not have won. I'm not talking about whether or not Christians can vote for one or the other, or for either, for that matter. That's not the focus of the video today. And I'm not really going to be talking about the reaction of many Christians following the election. I will be touching on it a little bit, because there were certain instances where I felt, and many other people felt, that Christians were reacting in a very unchristian way. But what I'm talking about today is when people like me who were saying to fellow Christians, hey, come on, your tone here is a little bit off in how you're reacting to the election results. The response that came from our brothers and sisters, for that matter, is more my focus today. Because as Christians, we are called to hold one another to account, absolutely. We shouldn't just live and let live in many aspects of our Christian walk, and especially those with our brothers and sisters. We are called to hold each other to account. And so what I'd like to do is share a few Bible verses with you that really highlight some of these aspects of accountability, and not only that we should do it, but how we should do it. And the first verse that I want to share, it's in Matthew 18, verse 15. If your brother sins, go and show him his fault in private. If he listens to you, you have won your brother. And that really is, I think, one of the fundamental points here, is why are we trying to correct someone? Are we looking to win an argument? Are we looking to lift ourselves up? Are we looking to put the other person down? Or is our goal genuinely to win somebody over to our side? If our goal is to actually win our brother and to have a meaningful relationship with them going forward, then we really have to make sure that how we approach it is done with this goal in mind. How we word our reaction, how we interact with them in a process, because it can be a process. Social media is terrible for accountability because it's very hard really to have a proper dialogue. But in whichever mode or method that we're communicating with a brother or sister, our goal should be to win them back, and our tone and our words should really reflect that goal. And the second verse that I want to share is in 2 Timothy. It's 2 Timothy 4, verse 2. Preach the word. Be ready in season and out of season. Reprove, rebuke, exhort, with great patience and instruction. And there are a couple of points here in this verse that I think are very important when we're engaging in correction of someone. The first is that it says rebuke and teach. So not only are we showing somebody that what they said or did was wrong, but we're also showing them a way forward. Correction means literally that. It doesn't mean just to stop or to tell somebody off, but rather to put them back on a right way. And this verse makes it very clear that being patient is very, very key to correction. It should be done in patience, and it should be done with patience. It can be very frustrating, especially on social media, if you're engaging in a discussion with someone, to kind of have that misunderstanding that often happens, and you can never get the tone really right through social media and other written forms generally. And so there can be a lot of frustration, and it's very important to maintain patience if you're holding somebody accountable and they don't seem to be responding properly. Keep patient. That's very, very important. The next verse is in Colossians 3:16. Let the word of Christ richly dwell within you, with all wisdom, teaching and admonishing one another with psalms and hymns and spiritual songs, singing with thankfulness to your hearts in God. And so again, we see this connection between correction and teaching. The two go together, and the believers in Colossae were there being really clearly informed to keep them together. If you're correcting somebody, you need to teach them. And teaching generally, of course, also has an element of correction in it. You can't teach somebody something new, or, what are you really teaching them if there's not going to be any change in that person? You're not really teaching them, but rather you're telling them something that they already know. So if we're correcting somebody or teaching somebody, there has to be an element of both in there. If we're trying to correct somebody without showing them something new, then, as I said with the previous verse, we're basically just pointing out their faults. We have to help people to come onto a walk with God. That ties back to the very first one. What is our goal? Is our goal just to show off, to show that we're right and that the other person's wrong, and in many ways humiliate them? Or is our goal really to win the brother back onto the right way? Are we looking just to lift ourselves up, or are we looking to really help people to realize that they are wrong and to come back into a right path? The next verse is Ephesians 4, verse 15. But speaking the truth in love, we are to grow up in all aspects into him who is the head, even Christ. Now we have to remember that Jesus Christ was the embodiment of love here on earth. And many people will point out some of the things that he said and did, such as how he would talk to the Sadducees and the Pharisees, calling them a nest of vipers and offspring of Satan, or how he would tip over the tables in the temple. And that's absolutely true. He did those things, and he was and is and always will be love. So we do have to reconcile those things together. But he was also very much aware of the heart behind the issues that those people had. And let's be honest, of course, the temple was an extremely sacred place for Jesus. So we have to really take that particular instance in the context that it is. But generally speaking, when he was coming to people who he genuinely knew would be able to grow and develop, his approach was very different. He had the patience. He had the long-suffering. He even loved so far as to lay his life down so that we could come into relationship with God, that we could be shown that we're on a wrong way, and that we could be won back onto being on the right path. So for all of the things that Jesus did that many people would kind of raise their arms up and say, yes, see, he's calling people out, he's calling people names, he's being violent, we also have to remember that those were against people who would not change, who could not be won back over. Whereas if we are communicating with our fellow believers in Christ, then again, we should be really looking at how Jesus was approaching people in a similar situation, which was in love and with patience and with kindness. That's how Jesus would be doing it. If I was to be correcting somebody in a way that Jesus was correcting the Pharisees, what am I saying about that person? I'm basically saying that they're not really a believer in Christ, that they are a Pharisee. And of course, sometimes tough love is needed. I'm not saying that we never should be strict and always should be namby-pamby and kind of always putting on the kid gloves and stroking somebody's hair and saying, "Oh, you poor one." That's not what I'm saying at all. But we always have to be extremely honest with our motives and our heart attitude to correcting somebody. And we very much have to look at doing it in love as Jesus Christ did. The final Bible verse that I want to share today is in 1 John 4, 7 and 8. "Beloved, let us love one another, for love is from God, and anyone who loves is born of God and knows God. The one who does not love does not know God, for God is love." Now, of course, we know that John and love go very much hand in hand. He was the one who said that he was the apostle who was most loved by Jesus. And in his letters, love was very much a strong topic. And even outside of that, we know from early church writings that he would very often ask to be helped to the front in his old age, to be able to share something with the congregation, and he would tell them to love one another. That was, for John, the most important message that he could share with them. And I think it's very important here that we notice in the verse that it says if we don't love, then we don't know God. And again, that comes back to this heart attitude of how and why we're correcting somebody. If we're not doing it with love and from a position of love, then is it godly? And even if that is tough love, it's still love, and it has to still be loving. And that's very much an issue where I think a lot of people can be dishonest with themselves, and they're not doing it in a loving way. And really, then they're not doing it in a godly way at all. You know, I could kind of use that verse to say, well, if somebody's not doing it from a position of love, do they know God? And if they don't know God, are they really saved? But I'm not going to call somebody's salvation into question here over this. If you notice in somebody a regular pattern of correcting in an unloving way, and there never really seems to be any kind of godly love coming through in what they're doing, then I think maybe it's right to question it. But that's not particularly what I want to do right now. I just wanted to highlight that it has to come from a loving place because God is love. And in all the correction that God does, in all the correction that Jesus does, it was based on love. And we know that even now, God is graceful through his love, and that there is still a chance for people. The door is still open for many people to be saved. Calvinists would disagree with me, but there is still the door open for people to come into a relationship with God because of his grace, because of his love. And of course, in many ways and in many different areas, we are going to have disagreements with our brothers and sisters. The Bible makes it very clear that we will come towards a unity of faith, but at the moment we do or should have a unity of spirit, and that spirit is a spirit of love. So even in our disagreements, and even when we're correcting one another, we should really be doing it from a position of love. And when Jesus comes back and we are all living under his kingship directly, then of course we will have unity of the faith, but we're not there yet. And so there will be disagreements. What is very important is how we deal with those disagreements. There are many examples in the New Testament of how believers were correcting one another. So if we remember when Peter was happy to be with the Gentiles, but then when some very strict Jewish converts to Christianity came to visit, he then was more with them and not doing the things he was doing before. And Paul called him out on his hypocrisy. but he did it in a loving way and with the goal of correction, not just pointing out somebody's fault. In all of the letters that Paul wrote, in some of them he was very harsh, but it was always with an aim to correct somebody, always with an aim of building up a relationship with somebody. He wasn't burning his bridges, and in fact in many of the letters, even when he seemed to be quite harsh, he was saying to them, I want to come and visit you. I long to see you. So a relationship was still very, very important to him. And one thing, of course, that he never did was called them names. As I said, people might refer to Jesus and how he would talk to the Pharisees and Sadducees. But I'm not entirely sure that we can use the Pharisees and Sadducees as a direct example for how we should interact with our fellow believers. And so to sum up, I think when we look through those Bible verses, we see, of course, we are called to correct our brothers and sisters. We should want to do so, absolutely, but from a position of love and with a view to actually bringing that brother or sister back into the right way and having an ongoing relationship with them. Now, in social media, that can be very, very hard, and particularly when it comes to things like politics, where there is so much polarization at the moment. And it can be very hard to not really understand why somebody might feel differently or see something differently than we do when it comes to politics. But going beyond that and looking at the person themselves. And they might well disagree with us, and we might well not understand that at all. But at the same time, they are a brother or sister, and we should see the value that Jesus Christ sees in them. There were some examples of people calling one another out and doing so in a way that not only suggested that they weren't really believers, but really calling people prophets of Baal and referring to how Elijah treated the prophets of Baal when God won on Mount Carmel. And I think that generally is an extremely dark tone, which I think shows the heart of some people, or at least how they display their heart on social media. And of course, if you're on social media, it should be for calling people to Christ if you're a Christian. And so we have to be very mindful of the tone that we set when we're on social media. But even outside of social media, when it's inside our church, why are we doing that? As Jesus said, he said, first look at the rafter in your own eye before you call out something in a brother or sister. And that's not to say that first of all we have to be perfect before we can call something out. Jesus there referring to the rafter in our eye and the speck in the eye of a brother or sister shows that really if we are tolerating terrible things in our own lives and then we're correcting our brother or sister in a small thing, there's a certain element of hypocrisy there. And it also very much comes down to relationship in general. I wouldn't necessarily correct somebody if I don't have a relationship with them, and certainly without asking. Whereas of course, in social media, that's not really possible. And as we saw in the very first Bible verse, Jesus said to go to somebody privately, first of all, and correct them, rather than, first of all, publicly. There are other Bible verses where it talks about rebuking somebody for a sin, and that should be done in front of everyone, especially when it comes to elders, and that is also true. Of course, we can still approach that person privately, first of all, and engage with them in a place of relationship. So when we come to hold somebody to account, when we do come to correct somebody, please do be mindful that you're doing it from a position of love and with the goal of winning your brother or sister back. Make sure that you're firm in your own belief, that you are right, or at least then be open to a discussion and maybe of being corrected yourself. It's very important as well. But ultimately, do it in love. The aim should be to win our brother back and to correct them and show them a new way of moving forward. That should be our aim. So thanks for watching this video. Please do like if it's been helpful to you. And if you have any questions or comments, please do put them below. If there's anything where you've experienced correction from a brother or sister that you feel maybe wasn't in a position, how did you react to that? That's also another thing. Or if somebody was correcting you in love, how do you react to that? I know not many people like to be corrected, but I think it's very important that we do examine how we react to correction ourselves. Thank you for watching, and until next time, be blessed.